Good afternoon everybody and welcome to the stream. Oh dear. We have a little technical error, don't we? Let me fix that. No, not piano and poetry. It appears OBS has captured the wrong window for some strange reason. There we go. Sorry about that. So where was I? Welcome to the stream. I'm Robert from the El Magnifico Games channel, and today we're going to continue with our usual Wednesday poetry and riddles. But first, a couple of things I want to talk about. First thing is that I have attempted to increase the quality of the video quality of the stream slightly. I would be surprised if you could see a difference in this particular stream because as far as video is concerned, this stream tends to be fairly static. There's not a lot of motion going on, and also the assets themselves aren't necessarily that high quality. but it should make more of a difference to my video game streams if you notice anything particularly different, either it being particularly better than usual or in fact there being more problems with the stream. Please let me know. The other thing is, I think I have figured out how to shout out the lovely streamer that gave me a shout out 6 days ago. Walsh Magic. Let's see if this works. It did. Wonderful. So I know how to do that now. So without further ado, let's get into it. So we were looking at some poetry by Thomas Campion. Now I'll need to remind myself who Thomas Campion was. Second technical error of the night. Not quite sure why OBS is struggling so much. Oops. Sorry about that. Here we go. This should... There we go. Right, where were we? Thomas Campion. Thomas Campion was an English composer, poet and physician. He was born in London, educated at Cambridge, studied law in Gray's Inn. He wrote over 100 lute songs, masques for dancing, and an authoritative technical treatise on music. So that's who he was. And looking at the dates of his life, he was most certainly Elizabethan. Although he did survive into the Stuart era, it would seem. Anywho, we won't reread his whole page today, since I'm sure we did that last week, even though I'm having difficulty remembering it. And we will begin with the first part of this two-part poem, Devotion, which I believe is the poem that we finished on last week. So we won't bother with much analysis, we'll just go through it and then we'll start looking at some poems that we haven't seen yet. So, Devotion. Follow thy fair sun, unhappy shadow, though thou be black as night, and she made all of light, yet follow thy fair sun, unhappy shadow. Follow her whose light thy light depriveth, though here thou livest disgraced, and she in heaven is placed, yet follow her whose light the world reviveth. Follow those pure beams whose beauty burneth, that so have scorched thee, as thou still black must be, till her kind beams thy black to brightness turneth. Follow her while yet her glory shineth. There comes a luckless night, that will dim all her light, and this the black unhappy shade divineth. Follow still, since so thy fates ordained. The sun must have his shade, till both at once do fade, the sun still proved, the shadow still disdained. Follow your saint, follow with accents sweet, haste you, sad notes, fall at her flying feet, there, wrapped in cloud of sorrow, pity move, and let the ravisher of my soul I perish for her, love. But if she scorns my never-ceasing pain, then burst with sighing in her sight, and ne'er return again. All that I sung still to her praise did tend, still she was first, still she my songs did end. Yet she my love and music both to fly, the music that her echo is, and beauty's sympathy, then let my notes pursue her scornful flight. It shall suffice that they were breathed and died for her delight. Apologies about that reading, I think it was a bit substandard. Anywho, interesting poem. I'm sure we discussed it at length last week. Seems the main subject matter seems to be the legitimacy of well, frankly, worshipping someone, regardless of whether they themselves have, whether they reciprocate the feeling. In particular, the pursuit of a pure love, I would suggest, is seen as a worthy cause, regardless of its success. There's probably more going on here that I've missed, but at the surface that's what it seems to be about. So, let's move on to a poem that we haven't seen before, Vobiscum est Eope, also by Thomas Campion. I will look up what those words mean, since they appear to be in Latin. With you all, with ye, where you refers to several subjects. Peace be with you. Okay. Est is obviously is. So you all are. What's Eope? Could be Jope, since of course in Roman times the letter I and J hadn't yet become distinct. I certainly don't think it's Estonian for jacket. Then I don't know what that is. Give me 1 second, I want to check something quickly. Thought so. I had a small Latin dictionary on my shelf, my bookshelf, so let's see. Let's see if that has this word. What are words beginning with IN? Nope. I can't find Eope. Huh. Is there any possibility, even small, that that's supposed to be LOPE? I wouldn't have thought so. It doesn't look like an L. Looks quite distinctly like a capital I to me. Supposing it were, are there any Latin words spelt that way? Nope. Strange. Okay. Yep, I'm at a loss, I'm afraid. I can't really help. I don't know what Eope is. Anyway, let's get to the reading of it. When thou must home to shades of underground, and there arrived a new admired guest, the beauteous spirits doing girt thee round, white Eope, blithe Helen, and the rest, to hear the stories of thy finished love, from that smooth tongue whose music hell can move. Then wilt thou speak of banqueting delights, of masques and revels which sweet youth did make, of tourneys and great challenges of knights, and all these triumphs for thy beauty's sake, when thou hast told these honours done to thee, then tell, O tell, how thou didst murder me. Of course, I didn't think that it might be a name. I'm not quite sure why, it does seem a bit obvious in retrospect. Eop, which I'm probably mispronouncing, but I don't know how it is to be pronounced, was a town in ancient Thessaly. It is unlocated. That, unfortunately, is not very helpful. It suggests... Well, there's two possibilities, aren't there? Either there was a person named after this place, but Wikipedia doesn't even have that recorded, or possibly White Yope is a reference to the place itself, in which case it must have had some sort of mythological significance, which I don't know what that is, if that is the case. So sadly, I think one of the central subjects of this poem is lost on me. What else do we have? Meter and rhyme. Seems to be A, B, A, B, C, C. Which is a fairly common rhyming scheme. I've forgotten if that has a name. But still. And is it iambic pentameter? Is that what it is? Looks like it. Yep, I'd suggest it's iambic pentameter. Interesting that didst is treated as one syllable. That's probably correct because there's no vowel between the D and the ST. But when I pronounced didst, there is a very noticeable, though very brief, pause between the did and the I mean, I don't see how you could pronounce it without having a slight pause there. I'm not sure if it's a full glottal stop, though. Because it seems to me more like the pause, rather than being caused by a deliberate closing of the glottis, is actually caused by the movement of the tongue. I could be wrong, but I feel like the tongue has to move a bit to get from the d to the st, and it's during that interval that there's a brief break. Didst. But I suppose the point I'm driving at is that it would play havoc with the scansion if that weren't one syllable. Because obviously you've got then tell, O tell, with the stresses on the tells, how thou didst murder me. Clearly the stress should be on the mer, then der should be unstressed, and then me stressed. Anywho, that's what I have to say on the subjects of rhythm and rhyme. If there's anything in particular about that you'd like to discuss more, please leave a comment. But otherwise, let's look to the meaning of the poem. So I suppose I'll go through it line by line more slowly. When thou must home to shades of underground. I don't know what that means. I mean, it sounds like go home. I assume that home would be a verb, when treated as a verb, would mean to go home. Let's check that, shall we, actually? I suppose it could also mean to make a home. Noun is obviously the main thing. To return to its owner. The dog homed. Oh, of course! And in a more macabre sense, something like a homing missile, I suppose. To seek or aim for something. The missile is able to home in on the target, yes. I realise that a missile's target isn't precisely its home, but it's clear that there's a joint etymology there. So it says return to its owner. It's interesting that there isn't a sense listed of returning to one's home, since I assume that must be where it originally came from. To go to one's dwelling. What does the etymology have to say? From Proto-Germanic, home village, from Proto-Indo-European, village home. Right. Yes, so it seems like it's to do with... I mean, I realise a village is slightly larger than a dwelling, but it's to go back to the place that you're associated with. Which is why the sense listed under the verb, to return to one's owner, is so interesting. Anyway. So, when thou must home to shades of underground, I would suggest that it's more likely to mean return to one's dwelling place, or the place where one belongs, than to one's owner. But even then, to shades of underground, I'm not following. Sounds ever so poetic, but I can't fully understand it. I'll quickly check my physical dictionary for home, on the off chance that it will shine some light on the issue. It lists here, go home, especially with pigeons, send or guide homewards, furnished person, etc. with a home. Ah, see, that's closer to what I was thinking originally in terms of making a home. Well, I suppose interpreting this literally, it sounds like the subject of the poem returns to a home, which possibly they mean literally is underground, or possibly they mean is enclosed, in the sense that a roofed building isn't a million miles away from, say, being in a cave, in the sense that it would function as an enclosure. It would prevent the outside getting in, including things like light, potentially. I feel like I'm overanalyzing this, but I also feel like I'm missing the meaning. Possibly because I don't know what Yop is specifically a reference to, aside from a place. Like, why this place? It probably has some connotations I don't know about. Anyway, and there arrived. Okay, that suggests that they are going home. A new admired guest. Which seems self-explanatory. The beauty spirits doing girt thee round. Okay, what's saying girt? To girt, to surround or encircle. New word for me. At least I think it is. I wonder if that's where we get girdle from. Because it's not... linguistically it's not far from a T to a D. I could imagine girt becoming gird, and then and then the object which girts is a girdle. So where were we? The beauteous spirits doing girt thee round, white Yope, blithe Helen, and the rest. Okay, this does sound more and more like it's a person. Now Helen is probably Helen of Troy, who is famous for her love affair with that Greek whose name I've forgotten, who ultimately scorned her. And that led to... what did that actually lead to? I was going to say violence, but I don't know if it got that far. Do you know what? How about we take a very brief aside here just to actually look up what was the myth involving Helen of Troy. Also known as Beautiful Helen, Helen of Argos, or Helen of Sparta, was a figure in Greek mythology. Oh, excuse me. Sorry about that. Was a figure in Greek mythology said to have been the most beautiful woman in the world. She was believed to have been the daughter of Zeus and Leda, and was sister of Clytemnestra, Castor and Pollux, Philanoa, Phoebe, and Timandra. She was married to King Menelaus of Sparta, who became by her the father of Hermione, and according to others of Nicostratus also. The usual tradition is that after the goddess Aphrodite promised her to Paris in the Judgment of Paris, she was seduced by him and carried off to Troy. This resulted in the Trojan War when the Achaeans set out to reclaim her. Oh, I should have realised that. Because I read the Iliad some time ago. Perhaps it never clicked with me for some reason that the woman that had been carried off was in fact the Helen of Troy. Another ancient tradition told by Stesichorus tells of how not she but her wrath only had passed to Troy, or she was borne by the gods to the land of Egypt, and there remained until the day when her lord Menelaus, turning aside on the homeward voyage, should find her there. These legends are quite different to the legends that I was thinking of. Elements of her putative biography come from classical authors such as Aristophanes, Cicero, Euripides, and Homer, in both the Iliad and the Odyssey. Her story reappears in Book 2 of Virgil's Aeneid. In her youth she was abducted by Theseus. A competition between her suitors for a hand in marriage saw Menelaus emerge victorious. All of her suitors were required to swear an oath, known as the Oath of Tyndareus, promising to provide military assistance to the winning suitor if Helen were ever stolen from him. The obligations of the oath precipitated the Trojan War. When she married Menelaus, she was still very young. Whether her subsequent departure with Paris was an abduction or an elopement is ambiguous. Oh, is it ambiguous? Probably deliberately so. The legends of Helen during her time in Troy are contradictory. Homer depicts her ambivalently, both regretful of her choice and sly in her attempts to redeem her public image. Other accounts of a treacherous Helen who simulated Bacchic rites and rejoiced in the carnage she caused. Ultimately, Paris was killed in action, and in Homer's account, Helen was reunited with Menelaus, though other versions of the legend recount her ascending to Olympus instead. A cult associated with her developed in Hellenistic Laconia, both at Sparta and elsewhere. At Therapanae, she shared a shrine with Menelaus. She was also worshipped in Attica and on Rhodes. Her beauty inspired artists of all times to represent her, frequently as the personification of ideal human beauty. Images of Helen start appearing in the 7th century BC. In classical Greece, her abduction by Paris, or escape with him, was a popular motif. In medieval illustrations, this event was frequently portrayed as a seduction, whereas in Renaissance paintings it was usually depicted as a rape, i.e. abduction by Paris. That is actually an important... I know this is an aside on an aside, but the changing of meaning of that word, or at least its main connotations, is important in the understanding of some historic and mythological events, because rape itself originally had a very close meaning to, or possibly was the same word as reap, as in taking things from a field, you reap it, or the Grim Reaper who reaps souls. And so when you, for example, hear of the rape of the Sabine women in Roman history / mythology, that means they were abducted. It doesn't necessarily mean it in the sexual sense that we would mean it today. It doesn't mean that that didn't take place, but it's certainly not stating that it did. Anyway, Christopher Marlowe's lines from his tragedy Dr. Faustus are frequently cited. Was this the face that launched 1,000 ships and burnt the topless tower of Ilium? Anywho, okay, that's who Helen of Troy was. Sorry for the long tangent. So, where were we? The beauty spirits doing girt thee round, white Eope, blithe Helen, and the rest, to hear the stories of thy finished love, from that smooth tongue whose music hell can move. What do they mean by finished love? Do they mean a love which has ceased? It's ended? Or do they mean a successful... oh, what's the term? A successful romance leading to marriage? I'm not sure. Then wilt thou speak of banqueting delights, of masques and revels which sweet youth did make, of tourneys and great challenges of knights, and all these triumphs for thy beauty's sake? When thou hast told these honours done to thee, then tell, O tell, how thou didst murder me. Interesting. Okay. So, ignoring the final verse, it sounds like the writer is using, that is Thomas Campion, is using beauty as a synonym for the ideal woman, or women. There's probably also some connotations there of purity, because beauty and purity were well wound up in well, certainly in I was going to say in medieval tradition, but I think that this is of course post-medieval, but I do think it continued. How long did it continue to? I feel like the link between beauty and purity would have still been understood, at least into Victorian times. But at the same time, the next point I was going to make is, similarly, you see sin and ugliness heavily associated, which is why, for example, demons and the devil are often portrayed as being hideous creatures, which, strictly speaking, I believe is not compatible with the Bible strictly read. But on one hand, I don't think the Victorians would be so naive as to think that ugliness really was caused by sin. But at the same time, would people have felt that back then? Or even in medieval times? I doubt they would have really taken it seriously. I think it was more about iconography. It's about being able to is being able to express things through pictures in a universally understood way, because there would have been a lot of illiterate people, so linking physical deformity with an impure soul, a soul that has been tainted by sin, is a very easy what's the word? A very easy association to make. Anywho, I think I've been rambling on about that point for well long enough. What I'm getting at is that up until then, it seems to be all these references to beauty I interpret as really just working towards this ideal of this idealization of the feminine, this idealized conception of the feminine, and then it goes on to talk about, you know, knights and chivalry and that sort of thing, and tournaments and challenges and so on, to try and turn the concept of romance into something more grand. So more or less it's trying to take what could be a very trivial affair and make it seem like it has some profound importance, almost as if it's from Arthurian legend. But then in the final verse we get, "Then tell, O tell, how thou didst murder me," which is interesting. It's not clear to me whether the speaker here is supposed to be the hypothetical knight who lost and therefore didn't win the heart of the lady, which in which case that would just make this an interesting perspective for a poem. That's not what you expect. But it could also be something more lurid, such as an actual murder. But I'm not quite sure how that would build on what has been said up to this point, unless it was supposed to be a shocking surprise turn at the very end of the poem. I don't think they went in for that sort of thing so much back then, so far as I'm aware. Or it could be a reference to the finished love. See, the finished love could be a reference to the romance that was successful, which meant defeating many rivals. Or perhaps it's a reference to the ending of a relationship, and murder here is just being used as a metaphor for being dumped. Not sure. If you have any strong opinions, please leave a comment and we can discuss. I think I'll try and give this one last reading, because I don't think I did a particularly good job last time. And then we'll move on to the next one. So, Vobiscum est Diop. When thou must home to shades of underground, and there arrived a new admired guest, the beauteous spirits doing girt thee round, White Ope, blithe Helen, and the rest, to hear the stories of thy finished love, from that smooth tongue whose music hell can move. When wilt thou speak of banqueting delights, of masques and revels which sweet youth did make, of tourneys and great challenges of knights, and all these triumphs for thy beauty's sake? When thou hast told these honours done to thee, then tell, oh tell, how thou didst murder me. Right, so on a second reading, the verse from that smooth tongue whose music hell can move really stands out to me. It almost suggests that, I don't know, it could be that I'm just misinterpreting the line entirely. It strikes me as though it's almost suggesting that one has a great musical ability, but it's coming from an infernal source, hence an association with sin, but I don't know that. See, overall, I'm wondering if the interpretation here is really about a contrast between how romantic rivalry was presented in times gone by, such as in Arthurian legend, but then comparing that with someone who has actually murdered a romantic rival in the present day, and what a hideous thing to do. And so the point is that this murderer comes home, and then they have the delusion of these beautiful women of the past who are both symbols of great of ideal femininity, but also stand-ins for bygone attitudes. And the poem is about this murderer relating the tale of their exploits, which they're portraying as romantic and would be received as romantic by the guests, but then the actually murdered person is not as impressed, shall we say. But on the other hand, I might be misinterpreting this entirely, just on a read without complete information. That's what it looks to me may be going on. Anyway, we must get a move on, because it's almost 3/4 of an hour into the stream and I've covered one new poem. And it was a short one at that. So we have A Hymn in Praise of Neptune. So, of Neptune's empire let us sing, and whose command the waves obey, to whom the rivers tribute pay, down the high mountains sliding, to whom the scaling nations yield homage for the crystal fields wherein they dwell, and every sea-god pays a gem yearly out of his watery cell to deck great Neptune's diadem. The Tritons dancing in a ring before his palace gates do make the water with their echoes quake, like the great thunder sounding. The sea nymphs chant their accents shrill, and the sirens, taught to kill with their sweet voice, make every echoing rock reply unto their gentle murmuring noise the praise of Neptune's empery. Is empery an adjective meaning befitting an empire? Is it sort of... or that which befits an emperor, perhaps? An empire, the status of dominion of an emperor. Absolute power or authority, and it is a noun, not an adjective. So, I mean, the meaning at face value seems fairly clear. It seems to be a poem about the old pagan legends, and it paints a fantastic picture. But I feel like there is probably some subtext that is just going over my head. I'm sure it's not an accident that this poem is about Neptune. I just don't know what the subtext is. As for the form, what do we have? Yields and feels rhymes, obey and pay, but not sing and sliding. Gem and diadem, dwell and sell. Looks like it's mostly alternately rhymed then, but there's the occasional exception. Make quake, sounding doesn't. Hold on. Obey pay, sliding doesn't. Yields fields. So we've got ABB, CDD, EFEF. So the ones that don't rhyme are sing. Oh no, sing and sliding do rhyme. Sorry. Don't know what I was thinking. Okay, so that's ABBA, CC, DEDE. That's an interesting rhyming scheme. ABBA, CC, DEDE. So we have both an example of an enclosed rhyme, I've forgotten what that's properly called, but ABBA, a rhyming couplet and alternate rhyme. These are all things we've seen many times before, but never all together in the same poem, I don't think. As for rhythm, so it starts in an iambic tetrameter. We get a pair of feet here. There's a few lines with only 7 syllables actually, which look more like docked trochaic lines. Yeah, and I expect we'll see the same here. So yeah, it looks to me like this isn't an established form, but rather one that the writer invented, and that by repeating it they reinforce it. Which we've seen a lot of, which is fair. It's perfectly fair enough. I do wonder why Neptune. I mean, I did consider very briefly if it could have been a metaphor for the British Empire, but that barely existed at this point. This was well before Britannia ruled the waves, so I don't think they could be using Neptune and his commanders of sea as a metaphor for Britain at the time. I mean, Britain just wasn't a military power at this time. Of course, this wouldn't have been long after the Spanish Armada tried to invade, and although they lost quite convincingly, they only lost due to bad weather that destroyed a lot of their ships. Had they actually fought with the British Navy, there's good reason to believe that the British Navy would have been quite easily defeated. So yeah, not a superpower at this point, so I don't know. I do wonder what the subtext is that I'm missing. Still, let's keep going. Winter nights. Now winter nights enlarge the number of their hours, and cloudless storms discharge upon the airy towers. Let now the chimney blaze, and cups overflow with wine. Let well-tuned words amaze with harmony divine. Now yellow waxen lights shall wait on honey love, while youthful revels, masks, and courtly sights sleep's leaden spells remove. This time doth well dispense with lovers' long discourse. Much speech have some defence, though beauty no remorse. Or do not all things well, some measures comely tread, some knotted riddles tell, some poems smoothly read. So summer hath his joys, and winter his delights. Though love and all his pleasures are but toys, they shorten tedious nights. Interesting. Again, seems fairly straightforward. Seems like it's just a poem about the nuisance of winter nights being so long, which seems self-explanatory, but then also taking the opportunity to praise love and romance and the service it can dispense in winter. Right. What do we have for rhyme? Looks alternately rhymed to me. Yep. And as for meter, looks like it's iambic trimeter, which is a slightly unusual one. Oh, except towards the bottom. That looks like iambic pentameter, while youthful revels, masks, and courtly sights sleep's leaden spells remove. So it returns to trimeter fairly quickly, and again we see a form that appears to me to have largely been invented, but is then repeated, which reinforces it. Oh, there you go. What do we have here? Integer vitae. Vitae presumably relates to life, although I will double check that. What do they mean by integer? Obviously integers are whole numbers well, that's it, isn't it? It's whole numbers. Numbers that aren't fractional. But what did that come from? Does it mean indivisible? Whole, complete, intact, uninjured, sound, healthy. Fair enough. So, is this going to be healthy life or whole life? Plural of vita. Oh, this is English. We're looking for Latin. Inflection of vita. Life. Where did Latin go? That's strange. I don't know why it keeps going down to Malagasy. Latin. Life. Living, support, subsistence, a way of life, real life, not fiction, mankind, the living. Yeah. So, looks rather like it's referring to a healthy life or a complete life. So, integer vitae. The man of life upright, whose guiltless heart is free from all dishonest deeds or thought of vanity. The man whose silent days in harmless joys are spent, whom hopes cannot delude, nor sorrow discontent. That man needs neither towers, nor armour for defence, nor secret vaults to fly from thunder's violence. He only can behold, with unaffrighted eyes, the horrors of the deep, and terrors of the skies. The scorning all the cares that fate or fortune brings, he makes a heaven his book, his wisdom heavenly things. Good thoughts his only friends, his wealth a well-spent age, the earth his sober inn, and quiet pilgrimage. That's interesting. Was that a reference to life itself being a pilgrimage? So, a religious journey? Because that's an interesting metaphor that I don't remember coming across before. Nice little poem for what it is. What was I thinking? I think this was supposed to be pronounced violence, not violence, to make this scansion work. From thunders, violence. Yeah, I said violence because, of course, that's how we'd pronounce that word today, but that mucked up the scansion a bit. We also have alternate rhyming, so I think this is an iambic trimeter again. Yeah, with alternately rhymed lines. It's nice for what it is, I must say. Short and simple but well crafted. The meaning seems fairly self-evident. I'll give it one more read, why not? Then we'll keep going. So, integer vitae. The man of life upright, whose guiltless heart is free from all dishonest deeds or thought of vanity. The man whose silent days in harmless joys are spent, whom hopes cannot delude, nor sorrow discontent. The man needs neither towers, nor armour for defence, nor secret vaults to fly from thunder's violence. He only can behold, with unaffrighted eyes, the horrors of the deep, and terrors of the skies. The scorning all the cares that fate or fortune brings, he makes the heaven his book, his wisdom heavenly things. Good thoughts his only friends, his wealth a well-spent age, the earth his sober inn, and quiet pilgrimage. I just had a thought. Age and pilgrimage are only I rhymes. I wonder if that means they pronounced pilgrimage at that point. Hard to imagine they pronounced age, adge. No, it wouldn't be adge, would it? Pilgrimage, idge. Hard to imagine they would pronounce age, idge. And our last poem by Thomas Campion in this anthology, at least I assume, because this section seems to be what was this section devoted to? Was it sonnets? My scheme is simple. I have arranged the poets as nearly as possible in order of birth, with such groupings of anonymous pieces as seemed convenient. From convenience too, as well as to avoid a dispute royale, I have gathered most of the ballads into the middle of the 17th century, where they fill a languid interval between two winds of inspiration, the Italian dying down with Milton and the French following at the heels of the restored royalists. I wouldn't call these ballads. I think we discussed that before. But yes, we seem to be in the middle of that section, so I suppose it is conceivable that Thomas Campion might appear again. But I suspect not. So, the next poem is entitled, Oh, Come Quickly. Never weather-beaten sail more willing bent to shore, never tired pilgrim's limbs affected slumber more, than my wearied sprite now longs to fly out of my troubled breast. O come quickly, sweetest Lord, and take my soul to rest. Ever blooming are the joys of heaven's high paradise. Cold age deafs not there our ears, nor vapour dims our eyes. Glory there the sun outshines, whose beams the blessed only see. O come quickly, glorious Lord, and raise my spirit to thee. Interesting. I wonder why he wrote a poem about longing for death. Because that's not generally seen as a good thing. Perhaps the inference is supposed to be that this is someone at the very end of their life, and that they're just a bit tired of it all. Also, interesting that I think this was an iambic hexameter. I'm counting a lot of lines with 15 syllables, and this one in fact seems to have... Sorry, with 13 syllables, and this one in fact seems to have 15, which is a lot. So I think this is actually a... Because this looks more trochaic to me, it's got an odd number of syllables and it ends on a strong beat, and in fact begins on a strong beat, never. I wouldn't say never, it's never. That suggests that this is actually a trochaic... What would 5 be? Heptameter? A trochaic heptameter with a dot syllable at the end, which is very... which I think would normally be considered very unwieldy. It is very notable then that there are these explicit caesuras in the middle of some of these lines, because generally speaking, very long lines of poetry, those of about 7 feet and more, tend to break into two anyway, naturally. It's hard to read them as one long line. So for example, never weather-beaten sail more willing bent to shore. I feel like there's an implicit caesura between sail and more. Doesn't mean you actually pronounce it when you say it, but just intellectually, it's so long that you want to break it in two there. What else do we have? It's rhyming couplets. It is interesting. I wonder what effect Thomas Campion was going for when he decided to write poetry with such long lines. Perhaps the tiredness of the speaker is supposed to be being implicitly referenced by the long lumbering lines themselves. Because they seem to go on longer than... well, I don't want to say longer than they should, but, you know, longer than they normally would. Right, so we move on to some poetry by John Reynolds. Is it more than one poem? No. So, who was John Reynolds? The John Reynolds I got here is quite a bit later. I very much doubt that's who's being referred to here. Since we're still clearly in the 16th century. But Wikipedia didn't offer me a disambiguation page, which is unhelpful. Oh, possibly this one? Yes, this looks more like it. Although I would say he would have been 12 at the turning of the 17th century. So I'm not quite sure where it says 16th century here. John Reynolds was an English merchant and writer from Exeter. He produced a series of violent stories around marriage, adultery and murder, as well as some political writings that caused him to be imprisoned. Why do I get the feeling this isn't the same? Oh no, he did do poetry. Okay. Reynolds travelled in France on business and was probably resident there from 1619. His pamphlets caused him to be extradited from France and imprisoned by James I of England in 1624. He married in 1626, again in 1644, and is recorded in 1655, but not later. Reynolds wrote moral tales, poetry, political pamphlets around the time of the Spanish Match, and also translated works from France. Is that an attempt to marry off one of our monarchs to a Spanish lady? The Spanish Match was a proposed marriage between King Charles, the son of King James I of England, and Infanta Maria Anna of Spain, the daughter of Philip III of Spain. Negotiations took place over the period 1614 to 1623, and during this time became closely related to aspects of British foreign and religious policy before breaking down completely. Yeah, Spain being notoriously Catholic and having been at war with us within living memory, I can imagine that not being a popular suggestion. Where were we? He published in 1621 a first instalment of moralistic but sensational stories. He feigned that these were translations from the French, but in fact they were of his own composition. The collective title of what became a series of publications was The Triumph of God's Revenge against the crying and execrable sin of murder. 5 other similar collections followed the first one, in separate volumes. These tales had a long subsequent publishing history, and in their own period they formed source material for the stage plays The Changeling and The Maid's Revenge. In 1635 the 6 parts were collected in a single volume, but with each book still having separate titles and dedications. This collection was reissued in 1639 and in 1640, the second edition. A Dutch translation appeared at Amsterdam in 1667. A later edition, dated 1669 and illustrated by woodcuts, was edited by Samuel Pordage, who dedicated it to Lord Shaftesbury and added an unpublished piece assigned to Reynolds, God's revenge against the abominable sin of adultery, containing 10 several histories. Further editions appeared in 1708 and 1779. Poetry. Delaney's Primrose was an early work, published in 1606. In 1650, Reynolds published an imitation of the Arcadia with interspersed verse entitled The Flower of Fidelity, displaying, in a continued history, the various adventures of 3 foreign princes. A 7th edition with alterations bore the alternative title of The Garden of Love, London 1721. Reynolds dedicated his romance, which may also have been written in early life, to William Waltham, his father-in-law. He is credited with another poem that remained unpublished entitled Love's Laurel Garland. Political pamphlets. Vox Coeli and Votive Angliae, around 1624, and often attributed to Thomas Scott, concerns respectively the Spanish match and the politics of the electorate of the Palatinate, bound up with the outbreak of the 30 Years' War. Well, there you go. Quite the divisive figure, clearly. What is a nosegay? I should have looked that up. Sounds like something that smells nice, but we'll see. Perhaps it's a particular type of flower or something. A small bunch of fragrant flowers or herbs tied in a bundle, often presented as a gift. Nosegays were originally intended to be put to the nose for the pleasant sensation or to mask unpleasant odours. From the 15th century. An aroma, a scent. Yes. I can imagine them being very popular when the Black Death spread through England again in the 17th century. Anyway, so we have A Nosegay by John Reynolds. Say crimson rose and dainty daffodil with violet blue, since you have seen the beauty of my saint, and eke her view, did not her sight, fair sight, you lonely feel, with sweet delight, of goddess grace and angel's sacred taint, and fine most bright? Say golden primrose, sanguine cowslip fair, with pink most fine, since you beheld the visage of my dear, and eyes divine, did not her globby front and glistening hair, with cheeks most sweet, so glorious like damask flowers appear, the gods to greet? Say snow-white lily, speckled gilly-flower, with daisy gay, since you have viewed the queen of my desire, in her array, did not her ivory paps, fair Venus's bower, with heavenly glee, at Juno's grace, conjure you to require her face to see? Say rose, say daffodil, and violet blue, with primrose fair, since ye have seen my nymph's sweet dainty face, and gesture rare, did not, bright cowslip, blooming pink, her view, white lily, shine? Ah, gillyflower, ah, daisy, with a grace, like stars divine? There's probably quite a lot that could be analysed here in terms of flower association. I suspect each of these flowers has been picked very specifically to imply something about the lady in question. But to do a proper job of this would take a while, and I'm not entirely convinced it would be worth it. But if you feel otherwise, please let me know in the comments. Oh dear, not quite sure why I cannot speak properly tonight, but still. But yep, on the face of it, it seems a sweet little poem. Fairly innocuous. What do we have for rhyming? Blue and view, delight bright. So it looks like it's a poem where every how would you describe it? I know exactly what I want to say. Is that every second and fourth line in a stanza rhyme and every sixth and eighth. But more generally, it's like rhyming couplets except with an unrhymed line in between, such that couplets of even numbered verses rhyme. What do we have in terms of meter? Seems like it's iambic pentameter followed by iambic bimeter, which is a rare one. I want to check up the etymology of eke, because I think eke would mean managing at with some effort to just about do something, like eking something out. But it'll be interesting to see if this is supported by the etymology. It says also in addition to. Eke out. To supplement, to obtain with difficulty or effort. Yes, that's what I would have assumed. And eke her view. Right, an addition, a small stand on which a beehive is placed, a space is put between or over or under hive parts to make more space. Interesting. The noun is derived from Middle English eke, addition, increase, enlargement, from Old English ieka, from Proto-Germanic, I'm not even going to try, from something else to increase, add, enlarge, ultimately from Proto-Indo-European to enlarge, increase. The noun is cognate with Old Frisian arca, I think, or aika. Addition, increase, bonus. Old Norse grow, growth, increase, proliferation. The verb is derived partly from the noun and from the Middle English eken, to increase, add, enlarge, and others from three distinct verbs. Old English to increase, add, enlarge, to be enlarged or increase, or from Proto-Germanic. The English verb is cognate with Latin augio, to augment, increase, to enlarge, expand, spread, to strengthen, to exaggerate, to enrich, to honour, figuratively, to exalt, to praise. Old English, also Old Norse, to augment, increase, to add, to exceed, to surpass, etc., etc. Okay. So where it says an eco view, since you have seen the beauty of my saint, an eco view. Well, I mean, it can't mean to add her view or to augment her view. I suppose it could if it was suggesting that these flowers were decorating her, and thus making the view more pleasurable, more aesthetically pleasing. But I would have thought it's more likely it means eke in the sense of eke out. Maybe not, though. I mean, I was just assuming that there was a bit of imagery here whereby the flowers themselves were trying to get a good look at her, but weren't being held at the appropriate angle or height. But perhaps that's just my imagination running away with me. What does my physical dictionary have to say about eke? eke, eke out, supplement, defective means, etc. with. Improp. What would improp be? Contrive to make, livelihood, or support existence. Does that mean improperly? A dialectical form of obsolete. Esh. ECHE. Huh. Latin. Orgere. Increase, partly also. I pronounced that wrong, didn't I? In fact, I'm not. Why bother? I don't know how to pronounce Latin. Eke, adverb, archaic, also. So my physical dictionary largely agrees. Then, and eke her view. Does that really mean increase her view, augment her view? Perhaps so. Did not her sight, fair sight, you lonely fill with sweet delight of goddess grace and angel sacred taint, in fine most bright. Taint here means tint or hue. Anyway, I think we've examined that particular poem adequately. So let's look up who Sir Henry Wotton was. Sir Henry Wotton was an English author, diplomat and politician. He sat in the House of Commons in 1614 and 1625 when, on a mission to Augsburg in 1604, he famously said, "An ambassador is an honest gentleman sent to lie abroad for the good of his country." The son of Thomas Wotton and his second wife, Eleanora Finch, Henry was the youngest brother of Edward Wotton, 1st Baron Wotton, and the grandnephew of the diplomat Nicholas Wotton and Margaret Wotton, Marchioness of Dorset. Henry was born at Boncton Hall in the parish of Boncton, or Bourton Malherbe, Kent. He was educated at Winchester College and at New College, Oxford, where he matriculated on the 5th of June 1564 alongside John Hoskins. 2 years later he moved to Queen's College, graduating in 1588. At Oxford he was friend of Alberico Gentili, then Professor of Civil Law, and of John Donne. During his residence at Queen's he wrote a play, Tancredo, which has not survived, but his chief interests appear to have been scientific. In qualifying for his MA degree, he read 3 lectures de oculo, and to the end of his life he continued to interest himself in physical experiments. I've got a feeling we've read some of his poetry before, haven't we? This is sounding familiar. Ah, right, he's Sir Henry Wotton. I don't see him anywhere earlier in the Oxford Book of English Verse, so I wonder if he was in the previous anthology we were reading, the 100 Best English Poems. Yes, he was. That was in fact the very last poem we read on his mistress, the Queen of Bohemia. Although, as we discovered, that particular anthology often got the names of poems wrong. So where were we? His father, Thomas Wotton, died in 1587, leaving Henry only 100 marks a year. About 1589, Wotton went abroad with a view probably to preparation for a diplomatic career, and his travels appear to have lasted for about 6 years. At Altdorf he met Edward, Lord Zouch, to whom he later addressed a series of letters which contained much political and other news, and provide a record of the journey. He travelled by way of Vienna and Venice to Rome, and in 1593 spent some time at Geneva in the house of Isaac Casaubon, to whom he contracted a considerable debt. He returned to England in 1594, and in the next year was admitted to the Middle Temple. While abroad he had from time to time provided Robert Devereux, second Earl of Essex, with information, and he now definitely entered his service as one of his agents or secretaries. It was his duty to supply intelligence of affairs in Transylvania, Poland, Italy, and Germany. He served as Essex's secretary in Ireland from the 15th of April 1599 until the 4th of September 1599. Wotton was not, like his unfortunate fellow secretary Henry Cuff, who was hanged at Tyburn in 1601, directly involved in Essex's downfall, but he thought it prudent to leave England. Within 16 hours of his patron's apprehension, he was safe in France, whence he travelled to Venice and Rome. In 1602 he was living at Florence, and a plot to murder James VI of Scotland having come to the ears of the Grand Duke of Tuscany, Wotton was entrusted with letters to warn the king of the danger, and with Italian antidotes against poison. As Ottavio Boldi, he travelled to Scotland by way of Norway. He was well received by James and remained for 3 months at the Scottish court, retaining his Italian incognito. He then returned to Florence, but on receiving the news of James' accession, hurried to England. James knighted him and had offered him the embassy at Madrid or Paris, but Wotton, knowing that both these offices involved ruinous expense, desired rather to represent James at Venice. He left London in 1604, accompanied by Sir Albertus Morton, his half-nephew, as secretary, and William Bedell, the author of an Irish translation of the Bible, as chaplain. Wotton spent much of the next 20 years, with 2 breaks, 1612 to 1616 and 1619 to 1621 at Venice. He helped the Doge in his resistance to ecclesiastical aggression and was closely associated with Paolo Sarpi, whose history of the Council of Trent was sent to King James as fast as it was written. One had offended the scholar Caspar Schope, who had been a fellow student at Altdorf. The Doge of Venice, sometimes translated as Duke, was the chief magistrate and leader of the Republic of Venice between 726 to 1797. In 1611, Schope wrote a scurrilous book against James entitled Ecclesiasticus, in which he fastened on Wotton a saying which he had incautiously written in friend Christoph Flackhammer's album years before. It was a famous definition of an ambassador as an honest man sent to lie abroad for the good of his country. Legatus est vir bonus peregrae missus ad mentiendum re publicae causa, which I'm doubtless mispronouncing. It should be noticed that the original Latin form of the epigram did not admit to the double meaning. This was adduced as an example of the morals of James and his servants, and brought Wotton into temporary disgrace. So what was it? An ambassador is an honest gentleman sent to lie abroad for the good of his country. So what is the double meaning? Do they mean it as potentially being interpreted in a sexual sense? I'm not sure. Wotton was at the time to leave in England. Was at the time on leave in England and made two formal defences of himself. One a personal attack on his accuser addressed to Mark Welser of Strasbourg, and the other privately to the king. He obtained no diplomatic employment for some time, but seems to have finally won back the royal favour by his parliamentary support for James's claim to impose arbitrary taxes on merchandise. In 1614 he was elected Member of Parliament for Appleby in the Addled Parliament. He was sent to The Hague, and in 1616 he returned to Venice. In 1620 he was sent on a special embassy to Ferdinand II at Vienna to do what he could on behalf of James's daughter Elizabeth of Bohemia. Wotton's devotion to this princess, expressed in his exquisite verses beginning "You meaner beauties of the night," was sincere and unchanging. I think that is both the poem that we previously read, but also the poem that we're about to read. I think they're all one in the same. So thus the title in the previous anthology was incorrect. At his departure, the Emperor presented him with a valuable jewel, which Wotton received with due respect, but before leaving the city he gave it to his hostess because, he said, he would accept no gifts from the enemy of the Bohemian Queen. After a third term of service in Venice, he returned to London early in 1624, and in July he was installed as Provost of Eton College. This office did not resolve his financial problems, and he was on one occasion arrested for debt. In 1625 he was elected MP for Sandwich. In 1627 he received a pension of £200, and in 1630 this was raised to £500 on the understanding that he should write a history of England. He did not neglect the duties of the provostship, and was happy in being able to entertain his friends lavishly. His most constant associates were Isaac Walton and John Hales. A bend in the Thames below the playing field, known as Black Pot, is still pointed out as the spot where Wotton and Walton fished in company. He died at the beginning of December 1639 and was buried in the chapel of Eton College. Works. Of 25 poems printed in Reliquiae Wottoniae, 15 are Wotton's. Of those, 2 are well known: O His Mistress the Queen of Bohemia, and The Character of a Happy Life. Another much quoted work is his epitaph for Elizabeth Apsley, the widow of his nephew Sir Albertus Morton. He first deceased, she for a little tried to live without him, liked it not, and died. Oh dear. During his lifetime he published 2 works, The Elements of Architecture, which is a free translation of De Architectura by Marcus Vitruvius Pollio, executed during his time in Venice, and a Latin prose address to the king on his return from Scotland, 1633. Wotton shares authorship of the quote, "Well, buildings have 3 conditions: firmness, commodity, and delight," with Vitruvius, from whose De Architectura Wotton translated the phrase. Some have termed his Elements a paraphrase rather than a true translation, and the quote is often attributed to Vitruvius. In 1651 appeared the Reliquiae Wottoniae with Isaac Walton's life. So there we go. That's in great detail who he was. And we have 2 poems by him. No, 3. So, beginning with Elizabeth of Bohemia. You meaner beauties of the night, that poorly satisfy our eyes, more by your number than your light. You common people of the skies, what are you when the moon shall rise? You curious chanters of the wood, that warble forth Dame Nature's lays, thinking your passions understood by your weak accents, what's your praise, when Philomel her voice shall raise? You violets that first appear, by your pure purple mantles known, like the proud virgins of the year, as if the spring were all your own. What are you when the rose is blown? So, when my mistress shall be seen, in form and beauty of her mind, by virtue first, then choice, a queen, tell me, if she were not designed, the eclipse and glory of her kind. How very complimentary. I think I remember discussing this one before, and saying about how it was a very unusual way to promote one's love interest as by being insulting towards others, essentially. But now I understand more about the context in which this poem was written. This actually makes sense because the subject isn't a love interest. It is quite literally, well, I interpreted my mistress originally as one's girlfriend, essentially, but I think it literally means one's lady in this context. Mistress is, of course, the feminine form of master, so it can quite properly be used to refer to one's female employer. And since she was vying for who was it again? Sorry, she was trying to win the heart of a man to marry, wasn't she? So to go back to the article we just read, in 1620 he was sent on a special embassy to Ferdinand II at Vienna to do what he could on behalf of James's daughter Elizabeth of Bohemia. Wotton's devotion to this princess, expressed in his exquisite verses beginning was sincere and unchanging. At his departure the emperor presented him with a valuable jewel. So yes, it sounds like she was trying to win the heart of, or at least the hand of, the Emperor Ferdinand II. So now it makes sense why he's drawing this comparison to others implicitly, by comparing the stars to the moon, by comparing songbirds to the nightingale, or other songbirds, by comparing violets to roses. It's because he was trying to express how much more desirable his mistress was, that is his effectively his employer, or the person he was employed to help. So yeah, and that also explains the verse about by virtue first, then choice a queen. Because I seem to remember questioning that verse when we originally came across it, because I didn't understand what it meant by choosing to be a queen. Now that makes sense. She was literally trying to become a queen. Or I suppose technically an empress. So there we go. Right, so we move on to the next one. The Character of a Happy Life. Actually, I suppose I should have a very quick look here at the rhyme and rhythm of this one. What have we got? Appear, year, known, own, blown. So it's an ABABB rhyming scheme. Fairly straightforward. Is that 3 feet, 4 feet? 4 feet. 4 feet. 4 feet. That's 4 feet. You violets that first appear. That's 3. No. You violets that first appear. No, that's not. That is 4, isn't it? That's 7 syllables, so it's been docked. If it's been docked, it has to be trochaic. So you violets. That doesn't work. You violets that first appear. Anyway, I think it's largely iambic tetrameter, even if some of the verses are slightly suspect. Yep, that looks that way. So it's an ABA-BB rhyming scheme written in iambic tetrameter. So, on to the character of a happy life. How happy is he born and taught, that serveth not another's will, whose armour is his honest thought, and simple truth his utmost skill, whose passions not his masters are, whose soul is still prepared for death, untied unto the world by care, or public fame or private breath, who envies none that chance doth raise, nor vice, who never understood how deep his wounds are given by praise, nor rules of state but rules of good, who hath his life from rumours freed, whose conscience is his strong retreat, whose state can neither flatterers feed, nor ruin make oppressors great, who God doth late and early pray, more of his grace and gifts to lend, and entertains the harmless day with a religious book or friend. This man is freed from servile bands, of hope to rise or fear to fall, lord of himself, though not of lands, and having nothing, yet have all. Very thought-provoking poem. Interesting it said who God doth pray, since that obviously means who prays to God. Oh, I suppose it's the doth that does that. That makes God the object, not the subject. Who God do pray. Yes, that makes sense. Huh. Again, iambic tetrameter, I believe. And it's alternately rhymed. So, fairly simple rhyme and rhythm. And largely, it seems to speak of the virtues of living of mastering one's more negative impulses like envy and living a pious life, and how that frees one from both overreaching ambition but also fears of many things that could go wrong. In a way, it seems almost naive, which is surprising for someone that clearly, throughout his life, had trouble with things like rumours. This is an interesting one, actually. Who God doth late and early pray, more of his grace and gifts to lend. So, I suppose that refers to God lending the prayer gifts? Is that what it's saying? Could that be a indirect reference to the Wheel of Fortune? The idea that anything that God gives you is only going to be for a time. It's lent, it's never going to be permanent. Not sure. But I do think it's interesting that it's lend, not give. The other thing I was thinking, could it be referring to when you received gifts, it is your duty to lend them to those around you, as almost as a gratuity. It is interesting. So we move on to, upon the death of Sir Albert Morton's wife, he first deceased, she for a little tried to live without him, liked it not, and died. We read that earlier, didn't we? Although I don't think at the time I appreciated that was the entire poem, just an extract. I thought, it's powerful. I mean, it doesn't need more, does it? For what it's worth, it's a rhyming couplet in iambic pentameter. How very proper. What is the name of it? There's a name for short for phrases which seem appropriate to be written upon a gravestone, I think. I was thinking epigram, but that's not it. Because I was just thinking, it's almost... you could almost imagine that on a gravestone, couldn't you? What's it called? I've forgotten. Oh, possibly aphorism, although that's not what I was thinking. A concise, terse, laconic, or memorable expression of a general truth or principle. That's not quite what I was thinking of. Ah, epitaph. I think it was epitaph I was thinking of. An inscription on a gravestone in memory of the deceased. A poem or other short text written in memory of a deceased person. Oh, then this is literally... Sorry, this is literally an epitaph then. For some reason I get epigram and epitaph mixed up. When I try to think of them. Well, we move on to Sir John Davies, of which there is a single example of his poetry entitled Man. So, who was Sir John Davies? Sir John Davies, the 16th of April 1569 to the 8th of December 1626, was an English poet, lawyer and politician who sat in the House of Commons at various times between 1597 and 1621. He became Attorney General for Ireland and formulated many of the legal principles that underpinned the British Empire. Interesting. Early life. Davies was born in Wiltshire, possibly at Chicksgrove Manor at Lower Chicksgrove, to John and Mary Davies. He was educated at Winchester College for 4 years, a period in which he showed much interest in literature. He studied there until the age of 16, and went to further his education at the Queen's College, Oxford, where he stayed for just 18 months, with most historians questioning whether he received a degree. Davies spent some time at New Inn after his departure from Oxford, and it was at this point that he decided to pursue a career in law. In 1588 he enrolled in the Middle Temple, where he did well academically, although suffering constant reprimands for his behaviour. Following several suspensions, his behaviour cost him his enrolment. Oh dear. I wonder what he was doing that was upsetting them so much. And he wasn't all that young either. They don't know when he was born, but he was baptised in 1569. So in well, we'll see. Oh, this was 1588. So he would have been... Okay, he would have been quite young. He'd have been 19. My mistake. Approximately. Worth noting that back in those days you didn't study law at university to become a lawyer. They had, as I understand it, more of an apprenticeship system. I don't know whether it was possible to study law at university, but it certainly wouldn't have set you up to be a lawyer. So what do we have? Davies travelled to the Netherlands in 1592 with others of the Middle Temple, William Fleetwood, Richard Martin. There in Leyden he met the jurist Paul Merula, to whom the group had a letter of introduction from William Camden. In 1594 Davies' poetry brought him into contact with Queen Elizabeth. She wished him to continue his study of law at the Middle Temple and had him sworn in as a servant in ordinary. In the following year his poem Orchestra was published in July, prior to his call to the bar from the Middle Temple. He was elected Member of Parliament for Shaftesbury in 1597. In February 1598, Davies was disbarred for the offence of entering the dining hall of the inns in the company of 2 swordsmen and striking Richard Martin with a cudgel. The victim Martin was a noted wet who had insulted him in public, and Davies immediately took a boat at the temple steps and retired to Oxford, where he chose to write poetry. Another of his works, Nosker Tepsum, Know Thyself, was published in 1599 and found favour with the Queen and with Lord Mountjoy, later Lord Deputy of Ireland. Davies became a favourite of the Queen, to whom he addressed his work, Hymns of Astraea. Hymns of Astraea in 1599. Later that year, however, his epigrams was included in a list of published works that the state ordered to be confiscated and burned. In 1601 he was readmitted to the bar, having made a public apology to Martin, and in the same year sat as the Member for Parliament for Corfe Castle. In 1603 he was part of the deputation sent to bring King James VI of Scotland to London as the new monarch. The Scots king was also an admirer of Davies' poetry, and rewarded him with a knighthood and appointments, at Montjoy's recommendation, as Solicitor General and later Attorney General in Ireland. I think we'll probably... Okay, let's read the section on his poetry, and then we'll stop reading the Wikipedia article there. Davies wrote poetry in numerous forms, but is best known for his epigrams and sonnets. In 1599 he published Nosk Tepsum, Know Thyself, and Hymns of Astraea. Queen Elizabeth became an admirer of Davies' work, and these poems contain acrostics that spell out the phrase Elizabetha Regina. What's an acrostic? A poem or other text in which certain letters, often the first in each line, spell out a name or message. Oh, okay, so it could be an... what's it called? Oh, what's the term? Not an abbreviation, not a mnemonic, mnemonic, why can't I think of the word? Acronym. So it could be an acronym, but it could be other things, presumably. A poem in Hebrew in which successive lines of verses start with consecutive letters of the alphabet. A kind of word puzzle, the solution of which forms an anagram of a quotation, and their initials often form the name of its author. Goodness, never heard of that. That sounds challenging. That doesn't seem to be working, which is a shame. So I'll assume it's just pronounced acrostic. So where were we, sorry? And whose poems contain acrostics that spell out the phrase Elizabetha Regina. His most famous poem, Nusc Typesum, gained him the favour of James I, by which he won promotion in Ireland. The three-part poem is written in decasyllabic quatrains and is concerned with one's self-knowledge and the immortality of the soul. A. H. Bullen described it as being singularly readable for such a subject, highly accomplished verse, no Elizabethan quaintness, both subtle and terse. Bullen also described Davies' Orchestra, or a poem of dancing, as brilliant and graceful. This poem, written in rhyme royal, reveals a typical Elizabethan pleasure, contemplating and trying to understand the relationship between the natural order and human activity. Davies' works are very well represented in Elizabethan anthologies. The last complete edition of his poems appeared in 1876 and is long out of print. Rhyme royal is a style of a form of poetry, isn't it? The rhyme royal stanza consists of 7 lines, usually in iambic pentameter. The rhyme scheme is A B A B B C C. In practice, a stanza can be constructed either as a tercet and 2 couplets, or a quatrain and a tercet. Yes, so those would be... I suppose in terms of rhyming structure, those would be entirely equivalent. They'd be isomorphic, but I suppose in terms of the ideas conveyed, you might care about the distinction. Since between the tercet and 2 couplets, or between the quatrain and the tercet, you could have a shift in meaning. This allows for variety, especially when the form is used for longer narrative poems. Thanks to the form's spaciousness compared to quatrains, and the sense of conclusion offered by the couplet of new rhyme in the 6th and 7th lines, is thought to have a cyclical, reflective quality. That's true, because... or rather, the first part of that is certainly true, because you begin with 5 lines which share only 2 rhymes, but then the last 2 verses will contain an entirely new rhyme, so I can see how that would create a sense of conclusion. Interesting that it's thought to have a cyclical reflective quality though. I'm not sure what, off the top of my head I can't see what about it would seem cyclical. Yep, we've read all that. Right. Let's get on to actually reading the poem, shall we? So, Man by Sir John Davies. I know my soul hath power to know all things, yet she is blind and ignorant. Let me start again. Man by Sir John Davies. I know my soul hath power to know all things, yet she is blind and ignorant in all. I know I'm one of nature's little kings, yet to the least and vilest things am thrall. I know my life's a pain and but a span, I know my senses mocked in everything, and to conclude I know myself a man, which is a proud and yet a wretched thing. Interesting. It reminds me of the quotation often attributed to Shakespeare about how wit is true wit is something often said but never so well, or something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing, of course. Often thought but never expressed so well, or something like that. So in terms of rhyme, this is ABAB, and it's, in terms of meter, it's iambic pentameter. It is interesting, the contrasts it draws. Anyway, let's move on to riddles, shall we? I think the last one we looked at then must have been 147, which is as follows. I am of wondrous parts composed, and of a tawny feature, set for my size in holy writ before a monstrous creature. With wings and dart I'm fortified, so armed with courage brave. Was mighty Hector now on earth, some of his blood I'd have. I soon could wound Goliath great, of Gath was he but here, in spite of his rich coat of mail, his helmet, plate, or spear. Was Guy of Warwick now on horse, with sword and lance so keen, I could beset and make him taste the sharpest of my spleen, the sharpness of my spleen. 10,000 valiant men I've marked, 'tis to the world well known, yet none can say one drop of blood from me was ever drawn. And I believe the answer to this one was a gnat. And I seem to remember the obviously drawing blood was, well, it says they haven't drawn it says it hasn't dropped any blood, but it also says that the answer to the riddle tastes blood, doesn't it? Where was it? Some of his blood I'd have. Yes, so it's a creature. The two most important clues here are that it's a creature that takes blood, and set for my size in holy writ before a monstrous creature. Now, I don't know specifically what that's a reference to, but I think in general... Sorry, I speculate that this is actually a reference to the fact that a gnat is considered a very small creature. I'm guessing somewhere in the Bible, gnats are used as an example of something very small. Just guesswork on my part, but that's what I suspect. So we'll check this. Knat. Is that an archaic spelling of gnat? You'd think I'd have looked this up last week. Maybe I did and just forgot. Yeah. In fact, you can see I've looked it up before. Oh no, you can't. That just says I've been to the page for gnat before. But still, I probably did. So there you go. And so now we can move on to the first new riddle of the night. 146. Sorry, 148. So, ye charming fair, whose growing fame is hurled swifter than lightning through the learned world, whose piercing wit unfolds deep mysteries, and whose search unveiled nature lies, show to the world, ye lovely nymphs, my name, for you or none can sure unfold the whole. I'm sorry, I can't seem to speak tonight. For you or none can sure unfold the same. In Paphian groves of old I fixed my reign, and little loves led of my wanton train. So sung the ancient bards, but now no more. I rest delighted with the Cyprian shore. Since barbarous Turks destroyed the blissful grove, usurped my realm and banished every love. From hence expulsed on plumes erect I rise, and now enjoy a station in the skies, where I employ my utmost power and care to shed kind influence on the British fair. Nor is my care unfruitful, for where Thames glides o'er the yellow meads with silver streams, a nobler pathos rises to my sight, and softer scenes of exquisite delight. These circling trees spread round their welcome shades, and smiling flowers glow through the checkered glades. On those I spread my most auspicious light, and like the moon am only seen by night. What time queen regent of the skies I reign, and usher in the brightest celestial train. But frequent changes in my place are found, sometimes I seem to wear a perfect round, then, like a silver crescent formed, I bear Ammon's stern front, whom ancient tales declare to be my father. Now ye fair, I pray, to the expecting world my name display. Well, at face value, I haven't a clue. Let's find out who Ammon was. Probably a biblical figure. Ammon was an ancient Semitic-speaking nation occupying the east of the Jordan River between the torrent valleys of Arnon and Jabbok in present-day Jordan. The chief city of the country was Rabbah, or Rabat Ammon, site of the modern city of Ammon, Jordan's capital. Milcom and Molech are named in the Hebrew Bible as the gods of Ammon. The people of this kingdom are called children of Ammon, or Ammonites. Well, I won't bother reading all of this now, but that is interesting. I bear Ammon's stern front, whom ancient tales declare to be my father. Interesting. Ye charming fair, whose growing fame is hurled swifter than lightning through the learned world, whose piercing wit unfolds deep mysteries, and to whose search unveiled nature lies, show to the world, ye lovely nymphs, my name, for you or none can sure unfold the same. In Paphian groves of old, Paphian. That sounds like an ancient Greek place. The adjective for it, Pathos, is a coastal city in southwest Cyprus and capital Pathos district. In classical antiquity, two locations were called Pathos. Old Pathos, today known as Coclea, and New Pathos. The current city of Paphos lies on the Mediterranean coast, around 50 kilometers west of Limassol, the biggest port on the island, both of which are connected by the A6 highway. Paphos International Airport, okay, that's not going to be relevant to us. Foundation myth, Jacob, the god of being blind. In the founding myth, the town's name is linked to the goddess Aphrodite, as the eponymous Paphos was the son, or in Ovid, daughter, of Pygmalion, whose ivory cult image of Aphrodite was brought to life by the goddess as milk-white Galatea. The author of Bibliothek gives the genealogy. Pygmalion was so devoted to the cult of Aphrodite that he took the statue to his palace and kept it on his couch. The daimon of the goddess entered into the statue, and the living Galatea bore Pygmalion a son, Pathos, and a daughter, Methame. Cynegus debated as if he is the son of Pathos, or Methame Suta founded the city under Aphrodite's patronage and built the great temple to the goddess there. According to another legend preserved by Strabo, it was founded by the Amazons. Anywho, in Pathian groves of old I fixed my reign. Maybe I should keep reading in case there's a reference to groves or something. Old Pathos, known as Coclea. Oh, Kukla? Oh no, that's Turkish. Coclea is on a hill to the east of the modern city. It had a road which spanned a few miles to the sea. It was not far from the Zephyrium promontory and the mouth of the Boccarus stream. Archaeology shows that Old Paphos had been inhabited since the Neolithic period. It was a centre for Aphrodite's cult. Aphrodite's mythical birthplace was on the island. The founding myth is interwoven with the goddess such that the Old Pathos became the most famous and important place for worshipping Aphrodite in the ancient world. The Greek names of two ancient kings, Etevandros and Acestor, are attested in Cypriot syllabary on objects of 7th century BC found in Corion. Aphrodite and Pathos. The Greeks agreed that Aphrodite had landed at the site of Paphos when she rose from the sea. According to Pausanias, although her worship was introduced to Paphos from Syria, it was much more likely that it was of Phoenician origin. Before being proven by archaeology, it was thought that Aphrodite's cult had been established before the time of Homer, as the grove and altar of Aphrodite at Paphos are mentioned in the Odyssey. The grove, okay, we're getting somewhere. Archaeology established that Cypriots venerated a fertility goddess in a cult that combined Aegean and Eastern mainland Aztecs before the arrival of mainland Greeks. Female figurines and charms found in the immediate vicinity date back to the early 3rd millennium. The temenos was well established before the first structures were erected in the late Bronze Age. I know this might seem like cheating to look up the answer as part of the history of this place, but I really have no idea what is associated with this grove. None whatsoever. A temenos is a piece of land cut off and assigned as an official domain, especially to kings and chiefs, or a piece of land marked off from common uses and dedicated to a god, such as a sanctuary, holy grove, or holy precinct. So again, this sounds like the place. There was an unbroken continuity of cult from that time until 391 AD, when the Emperor Theodosius I outlawed all pagan religions and the sanctuary fell into the into the ruins in which we find it today. Old Paphos was the centre of worshipping Aphrodite for the whole Aegean world. The Cineradae, or descendants of Cinyras, were the chief priests, Greek by name but of Phoenician origin. Their power and authority were great, but it may be inferred from certain inscriptions that they were controlled by a senate, an assembly of the people. I'm sorry about all these mistakes. There was also an oracle here. Few cities has ever been so much sung and glorified by the poets. The ruins of Aphrodite's vast sanctuary are still discernible, its circumference marked by huge foundation walls. After its destruction by an earthquake, it was rebuilt by Vespasian, on whose coins it is represented, as well as on earlier and later ones, and in the style of those of Septimius Severus. From these representations and the existing ruins, Gustav Friedrich Hetsch, an architect of Copenhagen, has attempted to restore the building. Well, I can't spend an excessive amount of time reading this particular article, can I? Okay, so at a glance, I still don't know what it was a grove of. This reinforces the idea that this is some sort of plant we're looking for. Interesting that they blame the Turks for destroying the grove, given that the site itself had fallen into ruin during the 4th century. In the late 4th century, so I'm not saying it's necessarily wrong in so much as the plants themselves might have survived longer, or they may have continued to care for the grove itself whilst not maintaining the buildings themselves, but it's notable. So, let's try again. You charming fair, whose growing fame is hurled swifter than lightning through the learned world, whose piercing wit unfolds deep mysteries, and whose search unveiled nature lies. Show to the world, ye lovely nymphs, my name, for you or none can sure unfold the same. In Pathian groves of old I fixed my reign, and little loves led on my wanton train. So sang the ancient bards, but now no more, I rest delighted with the Cyprian shore. Since barbarous Turks destroyed the blissful grove, usurped my realm, and banished every love, from hence expulsed on plumes erect I rise, and now enjoy a station in the skies, where I employ my utmost power and care to shed kind influence on the British fair, nor is my care unfruitful, for where Thames glides o'er the yellow meads with silver streams, a nobler Paphos rises to my sight. Shh! How arrogant! And softer scenes of exquisite delight. These circling trees spread round their welcome shades, and smiling flowers glow through checkered glades. Oh! And smiling flowers, I doubt it would be referring to other flowers in such. I don't think it would refer to flowers in general like that if it was a flower we were looking for. I think there would be an acknowledgement that it would be other flowers. On those I spread my most auspicious light, and like the moon am only seen by night. What time, queen, regent of the skies, I reign, and usher in the bright celestial train. But frequent changes in my place are found, sometimes I seem to wear a perfect round, then like a silver crescent formed I bear a monster in front, whom ancient tales declare to be my father. Now ye fair, I pray, to the expecting world my name display. Well, Ammon wasn't the father of Aphrodite, so we can rule that out. I really don't know. Honestly, I think I'm just going to have to look it up. I don't know. I really do not know. So what were we on? 148, I think? The planet Venus. Oh. I didn't think of that. So it was Aphrodite in a sense. Oh, I've gone too far, haven't I? Aphrodite being the... well, Venus being the Roman equivalent of Aphrodite. So let's go through this once more and see if it makes more sense now. Ye charming fair, whose growing fame is hurled swifter than lightning through the learned world, whose piercing wit unfolds deep mysteries, under whose search unveiled nature lies, show to the world, ye lovely nymphs, my name, for you or none can sure unfold the same. In Pythian groves of old I fixed my reign, and little loves led on my wanton train. So sang the ancient bards, but now no more are us delighted with the Cyprian shore. Since barbarous Turks destroyed the blissful grove, usurped my realm and banished every love. From hence expulsed on plumes erect I rise, and now enjoy a station in the skies, where I employ my utmost power and care to shed kind influence on the British fair. Nor is my care unfruitful, for where Thames glides o'er the yellow meads with silver streams, a nobler pathos rises to my sight, and softer scenes of exquisite delight. Their circling trees spread round their welcome shades, and smiling flowers glow through the checkered glades. On these I spread my most auspicious light. So, spreading light could be about a planet, but I suppose equally you could view it as being the holy radiant light of a god. And like the moon, I'm only seen by night. That's the clue. That's the massive clue that I missed. That's how we know it's the planet that's being talked about. What time, Queen Regent of the skies I reign, and usher in the bright celestial train. Usher in the bright celestial train might be a reference to something specific that I'm not aware of. I wonder what it means by what time, Queen Regent of the skies I reign. Because by beginning with what, it sounds like it's supposed to be a question, but it's clearly not. But frequent changes in my place are found. Sometimes I seem to wear a perfect round. Well, changes in place again make sense as a reference to a planet, because they seem to wander the skies from the perspective of someone on Earth. Sometimes I seem to wear a perfect round. Then, like a silver crescent formed, I bear. Am on stern front, whom ancient tales declare to be my father. No idea what all this is a reference to, I must admit. Sounds like it's something astronomical that I don't know about. Now ye fair, I pray, to the expecting world my name display. Okie doke. I think I'm gonna call it there. I know I only did one and I got it wrong, but this seems like a good point to stop anyway. So, thank you for coming. I hope you enjoyed the stream. I'll be streaming again on Friday, which should be more Metal Gear Rising Revengeance. I'll also be streaming on Saturday and Monday, which will probably be more Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, I should think. And then we're round to next Wednesday, which will be more poetry and riddles. Hopefully by then I'll be able to speak properly. So, once again, thank you for coming. I hope you enjoyed it, and have a wonderful night. Good night.